The girl in the woods. The girl in the woods was a mystery. She'd been seen by many people, but no one knew who she was or where she came from. Some people said she was a ghost, while others said she was a figment of their imagination. One day a young girl named Sarah was playing in the woods near her house when she saw a girl in the woods. The girl was sitting on a rock, her long hair cascading down her back. She was wearing a white dress stained with blood. Sarah was scared at first, but then felt a strange connection to the girl. She walked over to her and asked her name. "My name is Mary," the girl said. "I'm lost." Sarah took Mary's hand and led her out of the woods. They walked for a long time until they came to a small town. "Thank you," Mary said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You're welcome," Sarah said. "I'm glad I could help." Mary turned to leave but turned back to Sarah. "Promise me you'll never forget me," she said. "I promise," Sarah said. Mary smiled and disappeared. Sarah never saw Mary again, but never forgot her. She often thought about her and wondered what had happened to her. One day, Sarah was walking through the woods when she heard a noise. She turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadows. The figure was wearing a white dress stained with blood. Sarah's heart raced. She knew it was Mary. "Mary," Sarah asked. The figure turned around and looked at Sarah. Her eyes were filled with sadness. "I'm here," Mary said. "I'm finally here." And then Mary was taken away. Sarah never saw Mary again, but she knew she would never forget her. She always remembers the girl in the woods, the haunted house. Sarah and her brothers David and Michael live in a small town in Missouri. One day they were playing in the woods when they found an old abandoned house. The house was dark and creepy. It had a long winding driveway that led to a rickety porch. The windows were boarded up and the paint peels. "Let's go inside," David said. "No way," Sarah said. "That place is haunted." "It's not haunted," Michael said. "It's just an old house." Sarah didn't believe them, but she didn't want to be left alone, so she followed them inside. The inside of the house was even creepier than the outside. The floors were covered in dust, and the furniture was covered in cobwebs. There was a strange smell in the air, like something was rotting. "I'm getting out of here," Sarah said. "Just a minute," David said. "Let's explore." Sarah and her brothers wandered through the house, looking at the rooms. They found a library with dusty books, a dining room with a long empty table, and a bedroom with a four-poster bed. In the bedroom they found a journal. Sarah opened it and read. The journal was written by Mary. She lived in the house with her husband and two children. One day her husband and children went missing. Mary never saw them again. Sarah was scared. She wanted to leave, but didn't want to be left alone in the house. Suddenly they heard a noise. They turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was a woman. She was wearing a white dress stained with blood. Her hair was long and black, and her eyes were filled with sadness. "Mary," Sarah whispered. The woman smiled. "Yes," she said, "it's me." Sarah and her brothers were frozen in fear. They didn't know what to do. "I'm here to help you," Mary said. "I'm here to set you free." And then Mary was taken away. Sarah and her brothers ran out of the house and into the woods. They didn't stop running until they were safe at home. Sarah never forgot what happened that day. She knew Mary helped her, but she didn't know why. The old house stood on a hill overlooking St. Louis, Missouri. It had been empty for years, and the locals said it was haunted. One day a group of teenagers explored the house. They heard the stories, but didn't believe them. They thought it would be fun to spend the night in the house and see if anything happened. The teenagers arrived at the house late at night. It was dark and the only sound was the wind blowing through the trees. The teenagers cautiously entered the house, and they immediately felt unease. The house was dark and dusty, and the furniture was covered in cobwebs. The teenagers wandered the house, exploring the rooms. They found a library with old books, a study with a fireplace, and a dining room with a long table. The teenagers settled down in the living room. They lit a fire in the fireplace and told stories as they talked. They heard strange noises. They heard footsteps in the hallway and whispers from the shadows. The teenagers started to get scared. They wanted to leave, but they were afraid to venture outside in the dark. They decided to stay in the living room and wait for the morning. As the night continued, the noises got louder. The teenagers heard scratching at the windows and banging on the doors. They were so scared they couldn't sleep. In the morning the teenagers woke up and ran out of the house. They didn't look back. The woods outside of St. Louis were haunted by Native Americans killed by settlers. One day a young girl named Sarah played in the woods with her two younger brothers, Michael and Tommy. They were playing hide and seek, and Sarah was hiding in a hollow tree when she heard a noise. Sarah looked out of the hollow tree and saw a figure standing in the shadows. The figure was tall and thin, and it wore a long white dress. Sarah was so scared she couldn't move. The figure walked towards Sarah. Sarah screamed and ran out of the hollow tree. She ran as fast as she could But the figure was faster. The figure caught up with Sarah and grabbed her. Sarah screamed again and her brothers ran. Michael and Tommy saw the figure and fought it. They fought for a long time, but the figure was too wrong. Just when it seemed like the figure would win, Sarah remembered something her father had told her. She closed her eyes and prayed to the Native American spirits. Suddenly the figure disappeared. Sarah opened her eyes and saw her brothers were safe. Sarah, Michael and Tommy never returned to the woods. They were too scared. The old schoolhouse on the edge of town was haunted by ghosts of children who died in a fire. One day a group of children were playing near the schoolhouse when they saw a figure standing in the window. The figure was a little girl. Wore a white dress. The children were scared but also curious. They decided to go inside the schoolhouse and see if they could find the little girl. The children entered the schoolhouse and they immediately felt dread. The air was cold and stale, and the only sound was the wind blowing through broken windows. The children wandered through the schoolhouse looking for the little girl. They found a classroom with desks and chairs, and a playground with swings and slides. The children finally found the little girl in the library. She was sitting at a table reading a book. The children were scared, but they also felt sorry for the little girl. They sat down at the table and talked to her. The little girl told the children that her name was Emily and that she had died in the fire. She said she was lonely and wanted someone to play with. The children played with Emily for a long time. They played hide and seek and tag. They had fun. When it was time to go home, the children said goodbye to Emily. They promised to return and visit her soon. The children never forgot Emily. They often returned to the schoolhouse to visit her. They would bring her toys and games, and they would tell her stories. Emily was always happy to see the children and smiled. She was no longer lonely. The haunted playhouse. The old playhouse stood in the middle of the woods, a dark and foreboding presence. It had been abandoned for years, and its windows were boarded up, paint peeling and roof sagging. 4 children ages 10 to 13 lived in a nearby house. They were always curious about the playhouse, and they often discussed exploring it. Day they decided to do it. They snuck out of their house late at night and went to the playhouse. They climbed through a window and stepped inside. The playhouse was dark and dusty. The children could hear the wind whistling through the walls' cracks. They felt a sense of unease, but they were determined to explore. They wandered through the playhouse, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. They found a stage, a dressing room, and even props. As they explored, they heard strange noises. They heard footsteps, whispers and laughter. They started to feel scared, but they kept moving. They finally found a room at the back of the playhouse. The door was locked, but they broke it down. Inside the room, they found a group of children all dressed in old-fashioned clothes. The children sat in a circle, their eyes closed. The children in the playhouse looked up at the newcomers. Their eyes glow red, and they have sharp teeth. The house children screamed and ran out of the playhouse. They didn't stop and ran away. She never walked back into the woods and never told anyone else what she had seen. The ghost in the attic. The children lived in a big old house. The house had an attic, and the children loved playing in it. One day, they were playing in the attic when they found a door they had never seen before. The door was old and dusty, and had a rusty lock. The children were curious about what was behind the door, so they opened it. They unlocked the door, and slowly walked through it. A beam of light shone into the attic, and the children gasped. Inside the attic was a girl. The girl was dressed in old-fashioned clothes and had long black hair. The girl looked up at the children and smiled. Her smile was sad and lonely. The children were scared, but they felt sorry for the girl. They asked her who she was, but she didn't answer. She smiled. The children decided to help. They cleaned up the attic and made it a comfortable place for her to live. The girl was grateful for their help. She started talking to the children.